My husband texted me just before I left my military base. Don't rush. Mom has a surprise waiting for you. I smiled the entire drive home with my 1-year-old daughter asleep in her car seat, believing I was finally getting a peaceful weekend with family. Instead, I walked into a living room packed with relatives staring at me like I was a criminal. My husband slammed a DNA report onto the table and said, "She's not my daughter." My mother-in-law pointed to the front door and ordered me to leave without my baby. They thought one fake piece of paper would destroy my life. They were wrong. My name is Emily Carter. I'm 30 years old, and I've spent the last 8 years serving as an officer in the United States Army. Most people think the hardest part of military life is the long hours, the constant training, or being away from home. They're wrong. The hardest part is believing the people waiting for you at home are still on your side. 3 weeks earlier, I had reported to a military base for advanced leadership training. The days were exhausting, starting before sunrise and ending long after dark. Every night, before going to sleep, I video called my husband, Ryan, and our beautiful 1-year-old daughter, Lily. Watching her tiny hands reach toward the phone screen made every difficult day worth it. Ryan always smiled during those calls, but lately something felt different. His answers had become shorter. He often seemed distracted, and whenever his mother appeared in the background, the conversation suddenly ended. My mother-in-law, Patricia, had never approved of my military career. She believed mothers belonged at home, not wearing a uniform. She never missed an opportunity to remind me that Lily needed a real mother, not someone who disappeared onto military bases every few months. I ignored the comments because arguing only made things worse. I believed Ryan understood why I served. At least, I thought he did. The morning I finished training, my phone buzzed just as I packed my duffel bag. "Don't be late tonight," Ryan texted. "Mom has a surprise waiting for you." For the first time in weeks, I smiled without forcing it. Maybe this was exactly what our family needed. On the drive home, Lily slept peacefully in her car seat after I picked her up from the child care center near the base. I kept glancing at her in the rearview mirror, already imagining the evening ahead. I had stopped for Ryan's favorite barbecue, bought flowers for Patricia despite everything between us, and even picked up a small toy for my niece. As I pulled into our driveway, I noticed far more cars than usual. Maybe everyone had gathered to celebrate. Carrying Lily in one arm and the gift bags in the other, I opened the front door. The conversation stopped instantly. Nearly 20 relatives turned to stare at me. No one smiled. Then Ryan slowly stood up, holding a sealed envelope in his hand. Ryan looked directly at me before placing the envelope on the coffee table. "I wanted everyone here," he said quietly, "because they deserve to know the truth." My heart started pounding. The truth about what? Instead of answering, he pulled several papers from the envelope and slid them across the table. "A DNA test," he announced. "According to this report, Lily isn't my biological daughter." For a moment, I honestly thought it was some kind of terrible joke. I laughed once. Nobody else did. Patricia folded her arms with an expression that almost looked satisfied. "I knew something wasn't right," she said. "No faithful wife disappears to military bases for weeks at a time." The accusation hit harder than I expected. "I've never cheated on Ryan," I replied, forcing myself to stay calm. "Not once." Ryan avoided my eyes. The report speaks for itself. I reached for the papers, but Patricia grabbed them first. "You've done enough lying," she snapped. "I just want to read it." Ryan finally handed me the pages. The logo across the top looked familiar, but something about it felt wrong. The print quality was uneven, the formatting looked strange, and one page seemed to use a completely different font. Before I could study it further, Ryan took it back. "There's nothing left to discuss." "Actually," I said, "there's a lot to discuss." Several relatives began whispering. An aunt shook her head in disappointment. One of Ryan's cousins refused to even look at me. Then Patricia stood and pointed toward the hallway. "We already packed your things." I stared at her. "What?" "The suitcases are by the front door," she said. "You can collect the rest later." My stomach tightened. I rushed toward her bedroom. Closets had been emptied. My uniforms, personal files, laptop, and photo albums were stacked inside boxes. Even my spare house keys were missing. This hadn't happened in a moment of anger. They had planned every minute of it before I ever drove home. When I returned to the living room carrying Lily, Ryan held out his hands. "Leave her here." I took one slow step backward.
No.
"Emily, don't make this harder." "My daughter is coming with me." Patricia's voice became sharp. "She's staying with her father." Without raising my voice, I unlocked my phone and quietly started recording. Every face, every accusation, every demand. Then I looked directly at Ryan. "If this DNA test is real," I said evenly, "the truth will survive any investigation." I shifted Lily higher against my shoulder, picked up my bags, and walked toward the front door. Behind me, nobody tried to stop me. They were far too confident their lie would hold forever. I drove straight to a hotel that night instead of calling friends or family. I didn't want sympathy. I wanted facts. After Lily finally fell asleep, I sat beside the window, replaying every second in my mind. Ryan hadn't looked angry during the confrontation. He had looked rehearsed. Patricia had known exactly when to speak. Even the boxes in our bedroom had been packed with military precision. None of it felt spontaneous. The next morning, I contacted the Army's Legal Assistance Office. Within hours, they connected me with an experienced civilian family attorney named Rebecca Lawson, who specialized in custody disputes. She listened without interrupting while I explained everything. When I finished, I handed her the photographs I had secretly taken of the DNA report before Ryan grabbed it back. Rebecca studied the images for less than a minute. "What?" I asked. She leaned closer to the screen. "I've handled dozens of DNA-related custody cases," she said calmly. "Something about this report doesn't look right." She enlarged the laboratory logo. "The resolution is poor." Then she pointed at the report number. "And this identification code doesn't match the numbering format most accredited laboratories use." It wasn't proof, but it was enough to ask questions. Rebecca immediately contacted the laboratory listed on the document and requested verification through official channels. The waiting felt endless. Every hour, I imagined Ryan preparing more lies. Every hour, I worried about what he might tell people while I stayed silent. Late the following afternoon, Rebecca's phone rang. She answered, listened carefully, then smiled for the first time since we'd met. "The laboratory has completed its search." My heart nearly stopped. "They have absolutely no record of that report." I stared at her. "What do you mean?" "They never performed this DNA test." She turned the speaker toward me as the laboratory's compliance manager confirmed that the report number didn't exist in their system, the formatting wasn't authentic, and the document shown in the photographs had never been issued by their facility. Someone had fabricated the entire report. I closed my eyes as relief washed over me. I hadn't doubted myself. I had doubted whether I could prove the truth. Rebecca immediately began preparing certified requests for the laboratory's official records. Then her expression became serious again. "Emily, your husband didn't just lie to his family."
She paused.
"If he submitted this document to a court or used it to obtain custody of Lily, this becomes far more serious." Almost as if the timing had been planned, her assistant walked into the office carrying fresh paperwork. Rebecca scanned the first page before looking up at me. "He already filed for emergency custody this morning." The battle I thought had ended in my living room had only just begun. 3 days later, I walked into family court wearing my army dress uniform. Not because I thought the uniform would impress anyone, because it reminded me to stand straight when everything inside me wanted to fall apart. Ryan was already there, sitting beside his attorney. Patricia occupied the front row behind them, surrounded by relatives who had watched me be thrown out of my own home. None of them looked at me. Rebecca leaned toward me. "Remember," she whispered, "facts, not emotions." The judge entered, and the courtroom settled into silence. Ryan's attorney spoke first. He described me as an absentee mother whose military career supposedly kept her away from home for long periods. Then he presented the DNA report as proof that Ryan had recently discovered Lily was not his biological child. My stomach tightened, but I stayed quiet. When it was Rebecca's turn, she stood calmly. "Your Honor, before discussing custody, we request that the court verify the authenticity of the document presented as evidence." Ryan frowned for the first time. His attorney looked surprised. The laboratory has already provided certified records directly to this court, Rebecca continued. A sealed envelope was handed to the judge. He reviewed several pages, without speaking. Then he looked toward Ryan's attorney. Counselor, the judge said evenly, are you aware these records indicate the laboratory has no record of this DNA report? The attorney blinked. I'm sorry, Your Honor. The judge handed him the certified documents. The attorney's confident expression disappeared as he read them. Rebecca requested permission to call the laboratory's compliance manager by video conference. The request was granted. Within minutes, the witness appeared on the courtroom screen. After being sworn in, she testified that the laboratory had conducted a complete search of its records. The report number submitted by Ryan did not exist. The formatting shown on the document was inconsistent with the laboratory's official reports. The laboratory logo had been altered. Most importantly, no DNA test involving Ryan, Lily, or me had ever been performed by their facility. Silence filled the courtroom. I looked toward Ryan. The confidence he had worn at the beginning of the hearing was gone. Patricia suddenly stood. That has to be some kind of mistake. The judge looked directly at her. Ma'am, you are not testifying. She sat down immediately. Ryan's attorney slowly turned toward his own client. This report, he asked quietly, where exactly did you get it? Ryan opened his mouth, then closed it again. For the first time since I had walked through my front door days earlier, I saw uncertainty replace certainty in his eyes. The lie that had united everyone against me was beginning to collapse under the weight of the truth. The hearing ended without a final custody decision, but one thing had changed. Ryan was no longer controlling the story. Now, he was answering questions. Over the next 2 weeks, Rebecca's legal team gathered every document the court allowed us to request. Phone records, financial statements, email exchanges, text messages. None of it was exciting at first. Then one discovery changed everything. Ryan's personal bank records showed thousands of dollars in overdue credit card balances, several missed loan payments, and a notice that our mortgage had fallen dangerously behind. I stared at the paperwork in disbelief. We had always maintained separate savings accounts because of my military deployments, but Ryan handled the household bills. Every time I asked how things were going financially, he smiled and said everything was under control. It hadn't been. Rebecca slid another folder across her desk. There's more. Inside were messages recovered during the legal discovery process. Most had been exchanged between Ryan and Patricia. One message from Patricia read, if Emily believes the DNA report, she'll leave quietly. Once she's gone, keeping Lily becomes much easier. Another message from Ryan replied, the lawyer said appearances matter. If everyone believes she's the one who lied, the court may see me as the stable parent. I felt sick. They hadn't acted out of heartbreak. They had built a strategy. The fake DNA report wasn't meant to uncover the truth. It was designed to create a story that made me look dishonest before I even had a chance to defend myself. As the investigation continued, another fact surfaced. Ryan had been discussing a possible move to another state with a new employer months before the confrontation. His messages suggested he wanted to relocate quickly if custody worked in his favor. Everything suddenly fit together. The public accusation, the packed boxes, the changed locks, the missing documents. None of it had happened by accident. It had been carefully planned long before I drove home from the military base. When the second hearing began, several relatives who had attended the first confrontation quietly avoided my eyes. One of Ryan's cousins approached me in the hallway. I'm sorry, he said softly. We believed what we were told. I nodded politely. I understand.
And I meant it.
My energy wasn't focused on proving I was right anymore. It was focused on protecting Lily. As we entered the courtroom, the judge informed both attorneys that the final custody hearing would begin the following week. This time, every piece of evidence would be examined. And every decision would be based on facts, not fear. The final hearing began on a quiet Thursday morning. Unlike the first hearing, nobody entered the courtroom looking confident. Ryan avoided eye contact. Patricia sat silently behind him, her hands folded so tightly they barely moved. Rebecca organized our evidence into neat folders before whispering, "Today, the facts speak for themselves." The judge nodded for the proceedings to begin. Rebecca called the laboratory's compliance manager once more, this time alongside a digital document specialist who explained how official DNA reports are generated and stored. Using enlarged copies displayed on courtroom monitors, the specialist carefully pointed out every inconsistency. The laboratory logo on Ryan's report had been copied from an older version of the company's website. Several formatting elements had been assembled from different document templates. Even the barcode printed at the bottom contained invalid data. This document, the specialist testified, was not produced by our laboratory. Next, Rebecca introduced certified financial records and the recovered text messages. The courtroom remained completely silent as the messages were read into the record. One after another, they revealed discussions about presenting me as an unfaithful wife, removing my belongings before I returned from military training, and creating the appearance that Ryan had always been Lily's primary caregiver. No message suggested concern for Lily's well-being. Every conversation focused on winning custody. Ryan's attorney slowly lowered his pen onto the table. He looked exhausted. When the judge asked Ryan whether he wished to explain the evidence, he remained silent for several long seconds. Finally, he spoke. "I made terrible decisions." It wasn't a dramatic confession. There were no excuses about misunderstanding the situation. Just 4 quiet words that arrived far too late. The judge thanked him for his honesty, but reminded everyone that custody decisions must always be based on a child's best interests and truthful evidence. He explained that presenting fabricated documents in a family court seriously damages credibility because the court depends upon honesty when protecting children. After reviewing the complete record, the judge awarded primary custody of Lily to me, with future parenting arrangements to follow the court's established process and all applicable legal requirements. I felt tears fill my eyes as Lily reached for me the moment we stepped into the hallway afterward. I held her close, breathing in the familiar scent of her shampoo, realizing it was the first full breath I had taken in weeks. As Rebecca gathered her briefcase, she smiled gently. "You never won by shouting louder," she said. "You won because you never stopped standing with the truth." For the first time since returning from my military base, I finally believed the hardest part was behind us. 6 months later, life looked completely different. Lily was learning new words almost every day, and our home had become the peaceful place I had once believed was impossible to find. Between my Army assignments and motherhood, life stayed busy, but it was an honest kind of busy, the kind that ended with bedtime stories, laughter, and knowing my daughter felt safe. Some of Ryan's relatives reached out over time to apologize for believing the accusations without asking for my side. I accepted the sincere apologies, but I also learned that forgiveness does not require reopening every closed door. Healthy boundaries became one of the greatest gifts I could give both myself and Lily. One evening, while watching the sunset from our backyard, Lily climbed into my lap and wrapped her tiny arms around my neck. In that quiet moment, I realized something that no courtroom could ever put into words. Serving my country had taught me courage under pressure. Protecting my daughter had taught me courage of the heart. Looking back, I no longer saw the fake DNA test as the moment my family was destroyed. I saw it as the moment the truth uncovered who truly deserved a place in our lives. Because real family is built on honesty, trust, and love, not lies, fear, or manipulation. And once the truth finally stands on its own, no false story is strong enough to knock it down again.